Welcome to the Inside Scoop, your one-stop shop for cracking the leadership code. Have you ever wondered what those conversations are like in the boardroom? Curious about the secret sauce successful executives possess? On the Inside Scoop podcast, we sit down with successful executives, getting their unique perspective on what it takes to be a good leader. They'll share their hard-won wisdom, the crucial competencies needed to thrive as a leader, and the unexpected lessons learned along the way. Here, we unlock the secrets of the executive suite. We get the inside track directly from the leaders themselves. In each episode, we'll dissect the essential skills needed to go from manager to leader, offering a leader's perspective on the challenges, triumphs, and unexpected wisdom they've acquired. The Inside Scoop, leadership lessons, served fresh.
Glad to have you for another episode of the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Eduardo Bryant. We've got a great show planned for you today. It's going to be around interpersonal relationships, and we have a key person to talk to us about that. If you find something in this podcast that you like and you enjoy, well, we encourage you to subscribe and become part of our viewership. This podcast is available wherever you get your podcast. And so to our guests, we have none other than Mr. Dan Mueller. Dan is the Senior VP of U.S. Sales for Cursor Healthcare, and he is a great guy for us to talk to. You're going to want to hear his story, so please pay close attention because it is quite fascinating. Let's welcome him in. Mr. Dan, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Eduardo. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
You know what? It is my pleasure, and to some degree, it's an honor just to be able to get some of your knowledge and have you talk not only to our audience, but I always learn something myself. Before we begin, I always like to get started with asking people what they're reading. As executives such as yourself, I'm sure that you're staying on top of everything by keeping your mind sharp. So tell us, what are you reading right now?
So a couple books I'm reading right now. For fun, more leisurely weekend, I'm reading Boys in the Boat. So it came out as a movie. I live in Seattle, so everyone around here has seen the movie, and a lot of people have read the book. It really is a testament to kind of like come from behind underdog story. It's based on the true rowing team that went to the Olympics in the Berlin Olympics. The other one, more work related, it's called Strengths Finder 2.0. It's from Gallup, and it's really it's focused on discovering your strengths. So most people, they get hung up on what they can't do. So this one really, they do a self-assessment. It's a good one for if you have a salesperson you're mentoring or you're trying to develop, and having them go through this this checklist and then assessment, and then, okay, how can we improve it? So kind of a fun one, and then more of one focus on development.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a couple of questions about Boys in the Boat because
Yeah.
it's interesting to me because I've always wanted to be on a rowing team.
Yeah.
Always. But I just always wanted to be on one. So I'm going to have to read that. Give us a nugget from that. Something that you remember that you read that's like, wow, that was a good point. I'm just so fascinated by it.
There's so many parts of it. I mean, one of the amazing things of the book and the whole story is that it was basically like the JV team. It's University of Washington in Seattle. And they were like the younger guys, and they ended up beating the varsity team, which put them going to the Olympics. You can imagine we were talking earlier about certain people getting promoted, and they say, well, why were they promoted? But this coach, I mean, he laid everything on the line. He was probably going to lose his job if it didn't work out. And he made the decision and said, yeah, we're going to have these younger guys, they're both ahead of the varsity team, go to the championships, and then they ended up going to the Olympics. And everyone said, you're going to lose your job. This is a big risk. But, there was something he saw in those kids, and he took a chance, and, it all worked out. So the other part of it is, like, people always say how it's, tough time, how bad things are today. Like there's a lot of problems in the world, of course, but this book took place during the Great Depression. And so the main character in the book was living in a broken down car. Like he didn't have a home. His parents were working somewhere else. So things are always, you think they're bad, but you look in retrospect, it's, by a lot of metrics, these are the best, the last few years have been pretty good years. So I thought those two things it's definitely an inspiring story for sure.
Well, the old saying is, there's always someone worse off than you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
The
love
only
it.
thing, Eduardo, it's not going to teach you how to row, but you definitely should take I've done a little bit of rowing, but I after seeing the movie, I want to go through, you can do like a 3-week course where they teach you how to row and everything. It looks like a lot of fun.
Well, I just might join you on that because
Yeah.
I've always had the desire
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
And that other book is Strength Finders 2.0.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I've got the regular Strength Finders. I think we've all
Yeah.
gone through that one, but I haven't gone through the newest one that you've got there. So,
And I hadn't gone through the original one. So, I mean, I've done a bunch of different, in sales training and management training and this one I actually hadn't. I've read some other books by Gallup, but of course they do all the research and so it's not a long book as but it's a good, assessment, look in the mirror. It's not a book you give the book to someone that, it's like trying to help in their development, if you will. So it's you take like a lot of things, but you take it and you can take a lot from it, or you can just, read it. So there's a lot there's a lot of gold there if you really take the time to mine it. So
a lot of good stuff in there.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
yeah,
I like that. All right.
yeah,
2 books. Okay.
yeah.
Fine. Yeah. Well, thank you for
And
that.
I'm a big fan of the with the boys in the boat. Because I travel a lot, I don't like carrying the big heavy books around a lot of times. I do the Audible, so that works out. Like with the boys in the boat, makes it easy.
Oh, yeah. So
Yeah,
much. That was a great invention, right? So much
yeah,
easier now.
yeah, yeah.
Certainly is. All right. Well,
Hmm.
good. And what I want to know is, I want to know about your story. I want
Yep.
you to highlight that. You've gotten where you are. I'm certainly sure it's been through a lot of hard work. I'm sure you
Hmm.
had to really persevere. Share with us, how did you get to where you are right now?
Yeah. So I've been in medical device sales my whole career. I mean, a lot of people get into it with other industries, but graduated college. I was a biology major and then marketing minor. And I ended up, I said I really want to go into medical sales. So I was it's not always people ask me, how do you get into medical device sales? And I said, determination. Because everyone will tell you you need the experience, if you have to get a job and, if you can't get in, it's not always easiest to get in the door, but get some sales experience. Doesn't matter what it is, if it's something you enjoy, just get that sales experience. And then once you have that, but I was fortunate to get a job, and I worked for a couple different companies, really just as a sales rep territory. Um, I look back on, like, as a manager, I think as they say, I carried a bag for a number of years, probably 12 over 10 years, 12 years, where I had my sales territory. And I'm a athlete. I swam in college. I like competing. I like races. I still do some triathlons, just to motivate myself. But I think in sales, um, competitive, and then also building relationships. I don't think in sales it's as much about the big presentations. People say, yeah, how do you present really well? But some of the guys, when I saw going as I was starting, the guys that were the top guys, and you'd meet them and they'd say, well, some of those guys actually, they didn't, they weren't really that impressive presenting to big groups, but they worked the hardest. They were really good at building relationships, controlling the sales process. They knew their products, they knew their competitor. So I think I had that, like, where 12, 13 years of my career. And then I got into I was with Paul Medical, and I was asked to manage a sales team. So it was different divisions. So I had to take over a group of, because there were about 15 sales reps with some products that they were not doing well with. There were some new areas. It was more into the infection prevention, and it was areas that were doing really well in Europe because of some guidelines, but in the US they were not doing well. Some of them were water purification systems. So I look back on that time because I had, these 15 reps, and I divided them up into three groups. The one groups, they were not going for it. They said, we don't believe in this. They were super negative. And then I had the group in the middle. They were like, yeah, we're trying. And then you had the group, the kind of the stars. And so, over that first year, I basically went to all the guys that were and gals that were they didn't believe it. They said, I don't believe in this product group, but we're not going to make it. No one wants to buy this stuff. And so, over that first year, I basically said, listen, I'm going to give you a chance, but if you don't believe in this, then maybe this is not for you. Because I've always been lucky that I've had products that I believe in. I mean, I know there's people that sell stuff that not good products and they do well with it, but me personally, I just feel like if I believe in it, then I can sell it. But if I don't believe in it, then, and I think that's true in a lot of cases, if people don't, might be a great product, but if the person doesn't believe in it for whatever reason. So that was a tough couple years. We struggled for a couple years just to get going, but then we ended up turning the tide, and we ended up really showing some really good sales growth. And I was in that position for, I guess, about 6 years. And then I ended up taking a position. I picked up Latin America, and then I picked up Europe as well. So at that time, I was the global sales leader, and I was with Paul Medical. I ended up being with them for 19 years, which is an eternity in these times. But I went up through the kind of that classical, showing success and building relationships. And it's a big company, it's a Fortune 1000 company. So I learned, you manage down, but you manage up. You deal with the politics, and I was always a big fan of, I don't know if you know what servant leadership is, but I ended up getting a master's in organizational leadership from Gonzaga. And I got that towards the end of my time with Paul Medical. And there's a whole thing with servant leadership. You're trying to support your team in however you can. So, there's always all these distractions and things that sometimes corporate's doing, and it's the salespeople making their job harder. We were talking about CRM earlier. I'm a huge fan of CRM. However, a lot of CRM is excess work, and so then the salespeople they don't want to do it. So if you make it of value to them, whether it's making their job better, I think that's, again, going back to my original days of just being the sales rep in that territory. My company, Paul, was acquired, so I ended up, a lot of things changed, so I left there, and then I had a couple years where I worked for a couple startup companies, so that was interesting. It was in the healthcare infection prevention space, and then so that was fun. That was different taste of not a big company, really just trying to get a couple products off the ground. And then I joined Cursia about 5 years ago, going on 5 years, and we're in the infection prevention space, and which was good timing with when COVID hit. We were kind of right in the middle of trying to help hospitals and schools stay open with prevention, trying to prevent infections in that space. So that's kind of where I've been, and I'm I'm at a point in my career, I'm enjoying what I do. I kind of feel like I'm always going to be doing something. I mean, I don't see myself as a person that's like going to retire in 5 or 8 years. Some of my friends are talking about retiring in 5 or 6 or 7 years, and then so whether that's maybe on board, different boards, either nonprofit or profit, it would be interesting. So yeah.
And along the way, look at all the stuff that you've learned. You look at the skills you've developed. being in sales, you got to have that A-type personality. So that's probably one of
Hmm.
the reasons why you don't want to retire. I mean, you're just a go-getter,
Yep.
right? You know, still doing
Yeah, it's
some.
interesting. Like now you know, I've always been, I think, curious. I think curious is really good because I've gotten into with our markets, we've gone into different spaces. And I think innovation, but just we've gone into some new applications where you wouldn't normally think you go into, or a customer says, "Oh, this would be, have you ever thought of this product being used in this other application?" And then all of a sudden it leads to a whole new product segment. So um, I've done marketing as well, but I've never been like just a standalone marketing person. Because sometimes marketing's on an island here and sales is over there. I've always kind of been at the crossroads because I think, you know, sales is really, you got to know, you got to be really close to the customer. I mean, that's a big thing. I mean, everything's going, a lot of companies in health and device, even they're going to virtual, or they're, oh, we're just going to sell online. And I mean, I think in certain markets you might be able to do that, but you know, there's always going to be a need for, if you're developing new technology, new innovation, you're always going to be out there educating, you know, trying to help those customers use that technology. So I was I don't know if the old days of, I was with a sales guy. He was, I think he was like 23, and we walked into a hospital this week, and I was explaining, this sounds really crazy, but in the old days, you'd walk into a hospital and there'd be a bank of phones. There'd be like 7 payphones, and there'd be 7 sales reps. There'd be a rep at every phone. They'd be, you know, talking to their boss. The boss asks them what they're doing, and there'd be a couple other reps waiting, and then you go in now in a hospital. I mean, you just don't see a lot of, I don't know I don't know where those people are going. It's just kind of a different time. I mean, I know there's different departments and whatnot, but even we play more in the infection prevention, environmental services, but even we walked by the surgical desk, you know, the OR desk, and that used to be like, you know, there'd be like a few sales reps trying to sneak their way in that door, and you just don't. It's interesting. It's a different time, but you know, I think you got to show up. You know, you got to be there.
Definitely, you got to be there. Interesting. You know, you
Yeah,
talk about all this stuff that you've learned, and oh yeah, the phone banks and all of that,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you know, making these connections and the sales reps out there, and you know, that's kind of like our topic, that interpersonal relationship. You know,
yeah,
you've got to have that,
yeah,
especially now. It is
yeah,
needed more than ever, is to have some type of professional, you know, relationship with people, so
yeah,
that those people will at least be able to invite you back and allow you to come in, because
yeah.
a lot of hospitals now are closed. You can't get in. You know, you got to
Stuff.
have certain badge, certain criteria. You got to go through
Yeah,
some type of background.
credentialing.
Now you can't just get in anymore. So
Yeah.
I mean, can you teach that? I mean, from a management standpoint, can you teach interpersonal skills? Can that be taught? What do you think?
That's one area that I think you can improve on. You know, if someone's antisocial or something, I think you can definitely, you can't just, if someone doesn't like working with people, I mean, it's kind of like one of those basic people, do you like people? And everyone in an interview says, yes, I love people. But like, it's more like, I look at it more like, are you curious? Are you asking questions? Are you listening? I mean, my wife will say I'm maybe not the best listener. I need to improve on. But on a work basis, you know, are they talking more than are you listening more than you're talking? I mean, some of those things I think are, you know, a meeting in person, not just trying to flood emails, you know, email spam, and then you try to build a relationship electronically. I think that's, in our business, I don't think it works. So to answer your question, I don't think it'd be I think it can be enhanced. I think it can be improved, you know, but you've got a person has to be something they want to do as well. You know, they got to you know, the old Dale Carnegie, you know, I'm sure you read that 30, you know, number of years ago. I mean, that's still a classic, really a classic book, you know, how to talk to someone on when you're on a airplane and build, you know, you have a nice conversation with them. So, um, but yeah, I think it's something that's more the kid. I think the young kids coming through now, they don't even want to they don't want to call. They just want to text, you know. Now the customer might want to text too because they're in that same generation. They may be more comfortable texting as well. So now you've got like texting. That's tough to, you know, you gotta some point you gotta ask them if they want to go out to lunch or grab a coffee to talk through. So I think in some ways I think you have to almost force that, you know, face to face.
So think about being a manager that's perhaps, say, in their 50s, and they've
Yeah.
got a sales team and they're in their 20s.
Yeah.
Now you have that dichotomy where
Yeah.
perhaps the person that's in management and they may be in their 50s, they did it a different way, like what you're
Yeah.
talking about. And that's where the interpersonal skills come in. I mean, but now these, I call them young kids. These
Yeah.
young kids are so busy, they'll be much happier just to send a text. Or they'll
Hmm.
do some type of, I don't know, TikTok or,
Yeah.
I don't know, something that they're on. And I think that those interpersonal skills are kind of lacking. I mean,
Yeah.
from a management standpoint, you know, business is still done through some type of two-way form of communication.
Yeah.
And some prefer it to be in person, like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Versus not. So if you don't have a person that is able to have, that good one-on-one conversation or even a group setting, then
Yeah.
it can become a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, are there some gaps that you've seen in your tenure, your many years of training and your many years of being in leadership and all of the people you've managed and seen?
Right.
Um, what are some of those gaps that you've seen that, a sales team is lacking and just don't have today that they used to have? Maybe we'll call it back in the good old days.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the one way I think we already touched on, I mean, like the interpersonal piece, I think I look at that as I'm a big contrarian. I'm a believer in contrarian, meaning like where other people are not doing something, maybe they're not doing something as well. If you do it, coming in a different angle, it could be a different um instead of call, you know, it's like the can't get a hold of someone at a certain hour, you call them like first thing in the morning or at the end of the day, even sometimes the end of the day. But I think, you know, the fact that I definitely see it as a gap, but I also see it like from a company, if you can be, you can make that a big strength because I think a lot of there's that lack of, interpersonal, you know, not asking the right questions, building a relationship. Sales processes are still really long, you know, controlling. I don't think salespeople naturally ever did very well in terms of controlling the sales process because we're, you know, like salespeople are just like talking and it's like, okay, how do we actually control the sales process? And as much as you can, I mean, and that might mean just thinking, you know, a little longer term than just, okay, I'm trying to get the sale today but there's the bigger picture in terms of going after it. So I think you know I think definitely the control in the sales process. I'm a big one of the books I just finished called Grit. I don't know if you've read Grit, but I mean I think Grit is something. I think the Angela Duckworth Grit is it's very nebulous. You know, do you have grit or not? It's one of those. If you can find that out in an interview, you'd be very wealthy. But you know you ask questions to try to see, you know, were there times in your lives where you were having a lot of struggle and you were able to overcome those challenges? I mean, there's books out now that talk about how some kids, it's been too, they made it, the parents have made it too easy, and they're emailing they're emailing people to try to get them jobs, things like that. That is like, that's a that's not a good setup for, having grit. And I grew up I was fortunate to grow up in a good family, but at the same time, like my parents, Midwest, we were working all summer, and I just feel like I uh, developed that growing up. So can you teach grit? That's really tough. I don't, that's a complicated one, but I think there is some lacking of, I think, grit, because of, in sales, as you know, it's easy to get, you lose a sale, or the sales process is it gets longer and longer and longer. You're not having success, and then it's, you know, not to use the NCAA football thing, but it's like these players, if things aren't going well, then I'm just going to get on another team. So I think people are changing jobs quicker. Their things aren't working out right away. They switch. So not saying that's not always a bad thing, but I think there's something about grit that, like, if you have it, you're gonna it's gonna serve you very, very well. But it's kind of one of those. It's definitely an area I think is lacking. But I'm sure my dad said our generation was lacking in grit. So I don't know if I'm just like some old guy saying that, but I do think there is something to that.
And in management, how do you were talking about interviewing and hiring people, and you
Yeah,
mentioned that because, there is something to that. So how do
yeah,
you do that? And, wouldn't you say that that's where having those good interpersonal skills can kind of be tied into it in every facet of your job, including the interviewing process, where you're
yeah,
trying to hire, you're bringing people in, you're bringing
yeah,
new blood into the system. And in order to do that, you got to be able to ask those right questions. It's not
yeah,
easy. Most people
yeah,
don't know how to ask the right question. I mean, we always think of questions as, especially if you're doing interviews, and I'm sure you, like all of us, have hired and interviewed, thousands of people. We want to ask an open-ended question because we think that that is the end all be all of question asking, to be able to
yeah,
ask an open-ended question in order to get the other person to talk. But really, open-ended and closed-ended questions, that was way back in the day. Yeah,
yeah,
you want your person to talk, but there are so many other types of questions you want to ask. I mean, what about an assumptive question? Who even knows what that is? What
yeah,
about, a leading question? Who knows how to ask that? What
yeah,
about unbiased questions? Well, everyone thinks their questions are unbiased, but in
yeah.
actuality, a lot of questions are biased questions.
Right.
People don't even know the difference between, or they assume that they're not doing that. And these
Yeah,
are ways of getting people to really understand. So
yeah.
when you think
I
about,
think the other part of it is you can look at, you never know, of course, but there's a reason why, if you look at some of the medical device companies, would hire athletes. Okay. So they would hire, baseball or football or swimming or whatever. And I'm biased because I was a college athlete, but or high school athlete. Um, there's some pretty good arguments for that. Some of those companies have done very well. It doesn't mean all athletes have grit, but it's a in sports you learn, you lose, you get hurt, you pick yourself up. And it's not just sports. It could be other it could be definitely other activities where you've had the goal, you had your challenges, you lost. They say, I agree, you learn more from losing than winning, and sometimes everyone gets their participation, plaque, and but I think there are some there are some hints at um, you know, or probability or something, if you're there's something with being in sports that can point, you can point to, it's not a guarantee, but other activities outside of their work, and even like just the basics of like wanting to improve yourself. I mean, it's very general, but I mean, I'm a big fan of, like, I still want to learn and improve and things like that. So that all to me kind of points in in that same area. But I think there are some, you can look at some areas where you can kind of get some clues on if maybe someone has grit or not.
Mhm. Well, certainly leadership does that. And I know,
Yeah.
like yourself, being a college athlete, I got two boys in college myself, and I got one playing college football, and the other one is playing basketball, or I should say, played basketball. The thing there is the coaches, those are the leaders. Those are the ones that are
Yeah.
instilling that, what you're talking about, that grit, because they've
Hmm.
got a team. They're trying to make the team the best the team can be, but they're also trying to
Yep.
make really great people.
Yep.
Strong athletes come out to be really good people at times. So whether it's a sports for women or for men, these coaches are really trying to do that. I know I did it. I'm sure you
Yeah.
did, just in a
Yep.
management capacity of trying to make people the best that they could possibly be. Yeah, we
Yep.
want them to perform well, do well on the job. But in addition to that, what kind of person are you? You
Right.
and then when you can put that in them, they have that,
Yeah.
I think we call it stick-to-itiveness, where you just
Yeah.
don't quit the first time someone bumps you. You got to be able
Yeah.
to keep going. And isn't sales supposed to be designed that way? Where
Yeah.
if at first you don't succeed, you try
Right.
again. And that's how you can be successful. But that comes from having a good leadership team, whether it's a
Yeah.
coach or it's a manager. And coaches
Right.
and managers are performing somewhat of the same duties, you know, making sure that there's a connection. Because I love this quote that says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I
Mm.
love that, because you can be the
Yeah.
smartest person, but if you can't relate to me, then
Yep.
you're not going to get the best out of me.
Yeah. The other part I think is I've always tried to have fun, on sales calls. And as a manager, I mean, the best compliments I've ever had are like, I've had some great sales reps, and we go on, we work a day in the field, and we have some, we have success some places, and other areas, we get the door slammed in our face. And there was a place we were going to, sales rep and I, and we really had to go to the bathroom, and we're in one of these office buildings, and then, we were cold calling, and we couldn't get an appointment. And so then they're like, no, they're not going to see you. I'm like, okay, do you think I can get the bathroom key? And then she's like, do you have an appointment? And I go, for the bathroom? Like, we were just like dying. She literally would not give us a key. It was like an office episode or something. And so we ended up going somewhere else. And I said, okay, now the goal now is not to get the sale. The goal is to get the key. But it's like we had fun. We're making sales. It's a way to, lighten the, you have some bad calls, they're tough calls, and then you're able to laugh those off and focus on the opportunities. So that's something I'm always, I mean, it's not always fun, but we had fun more times than not, for sure.
I can share
Yeah.
so many stories along the
Yeah.
same lines, as I'm
I was
sure.
thinking of trying to do a screen, do a script for a show, and one of my friends like, that's The Office. I'm like, no, no, this is like a strictly. There really's never been a show like just strictly sales, where you're in a huddle, and a lot of the bad stuff. A friend of mine, his first job out of college was selling photocopiers, and that was like the ultimate, that was a tough, they would do a raffle where if they got the business card, they put it in, and the winner would get a TV. Well, there was no raffle. The whole thing was, a sham. So it was kind of a tough, but he got that year under his belt in terms of being able to knock on doors. So,
Well, that type of experience is fantastic. And try
yeah,
being a stockbroker. Try coming
yeah,
out and being a stockbroker and having to make all those cold calls, and
yeah,
obviously trying to get people to, let you invest their money for them and make those types of
yeah.
decisions. I mean, that's it. Selling copiers from back in the day, man, was that ever
Pitney
difficult?
Bowes.
Yep. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Pitney Bowes, man.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Xerox.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That was tough.
yeah,
But that's the stuff that,
yeah,
makes for great salespeople. I mean,
yeah.
and this podcast is about how we as leaders can effectuate those types of things. How
Right.
do we make people better? How do we shorten the sales cycle? How do
Mm.
we create not only strong salespeople, but good people, people that
Yeah,
have character? How do we do that? And, you know, you guys that are, I call it breathing that rare air up there, and you guys see this. These are
Yeah.
the types of conversations that take place in the
It's
book.
tough. I always say we've all hired, rock stars and not we've not hired the best people for those jobs, but the one thing I've learned is do not rush the hiring process. Like your boss says you got to have this person hired by the end of Q1 or whatever. It's like because you end up, then you end up 3 months down the road and then you're trying to hire someone else. It's easier said than done, but it's you can't trying to get through the process, but trying to rush it is. And even the other area, I'm actually really surprised in the US there's a hesitancy towards references. And so like if someone gets a bad reference, then they can sue you for not hiring them. So most companies actually won't give a reference. They'll just say person was employed here. And so, which I get that, but I want to talk to someone that has worked with them. And so that's the other thing I've learned. If you're trying to hire someone and they don't have two professional references that are going to rave about them, there's some red flags are starting to go off. But like I said, some of the companies HR wants to do that reference check, and I'm working for a little bit smaller companies where they'll let me make those calls. So that's maybe a US thing, but it's you never underestimate the call. It's not a green or red. It's like, was the person really, really excited about them? Or they just kind of like, because I've had that call too. We've all had the call where they want a reference for someone they're good, they're not the rock star, and you're truthful, but you're not like really excited, like you can kind of hear that in a phone call, I think. So anyway, go off on a tangent there.
No, no, no. It is a good tangent because you're touching on an
Yeah.
area there, Dan, that is so needed. And you're right about the whole reference thing. You got to be real careful there because something that's said negative will cause you to get sued. We have a
Yeah.
workshop that we do on interviewing because it's quite
Hmm.
interesting. Most people get promoted into a leadership position. Part of their
Yep.
responsibility is they have to fill open requisitions. So, like you said, your boss will say, you got to get this spot filled because maybe there's a new hire training class that's going to start, say, April 1. So you've got to
Right.
have somebody hired and ready to go to put them into that new hire training class. And so now
Yep.
you're under the rush. You may only have a couple, 2 or 3 weeks to get that done. And that's a real challenge is trying to find that right person. Well, one of the workshops that we run is an interviewing workshop, and it is very well received. The reason for that, I
Hmm.
think, is because number one, how many people, if you were to think and you were to ask, how many managers have actually been through a professional interviewing workshop?
Yeah, I've never been through one. And
And so,
been hiring people my whole career.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I always found
Yeah.
that interesting because every company says that our greatest resource
Yeah.
of people we hire. Well, if your greatest resource are the people you hire and you put other people in charge of hiring your greatest resource,
Yep.
would give them some training? You would think, but
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we teach this workshop on how to interview, and it teaches people because you can't get those references, which is what you
Yep.
alluded to. You can't really get good references. We teach them how to ask questions. I'll give you a couple that really makes a difference. Here's
Yep.
one. Here's a question that I think every interviewer should ask, and that is this. So when you're interviewing somebody, you ask them, on your last job or two, did your employer give you an employee evaluation? Most companies give some type of annual
Yeah.
employee evaluation. Well, then we ask the question, okay, so on the back of the evaluation, toward the bottom, there's a little box. It says needs improvement.
Mm.
What did your manager or supervisor write in the needs improvement box?
Yeah. That's a great
Listen
question.
closely. It is an amazing
Yeah.
question. Listen
Opens
closely.
up. Yeah.
It
Are they
does.
defensive?
Right. And it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
necessarily
What
what
they
the
say.
answer is.
Yeah.
It matters how they answer it.
Yeah,
If
that's
they
good.
start to waffle, and I've asked this question 100 times, and a lot of times this is what I get. I don't remember. Now, wait a minute.
Mm,
Wait a minute. You can read the entire
yeah.
evaluation. You're
One
great.
little section. Yeah.
That you come to work on time, you get
Right.
along with people, you're a people person, this and that. And then you get to that one section that
Right.
says, you're not a team player. Trust me when I tell you, the only
Yeah.
thing to remember about that evaluation is
Yeah.
they don't think I'm a
Is the
team player.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You never forget that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So interviewing to be able to get that, if you can't get the references, that's one of those questions. We get into this whole STAR method, right? Everyone thinks that
Yep.
that is the end all be all, where you ask a STAR question and have them
Right.
give the situation, task, and end up with the action and the results. And all of a sudden,
Yep.
you think you've asked a great question. No, 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 no. You don't know the story. So they can tell you anything.
Yep.
I did this, I did that, and ended up growing the business by, 115%.
Right.
You have no idea how that's true.
Yeah.
Another
Yeah.
thing, panel interviewing. This is another way of how you can get really good employees.
Yeah.
A panel interview is a trap. It is such a trap, because if you and I were sitting next to each other, this was a panel interview, and you just asked a question, and then the interviewee gives you an answer.
Right.
I'm going next, and I've got
Yeah.
my question. Well, in
Yeah.
your
It's
brain,
never, I've been in those. The whole thing is not a fan. I mean, I've brought in, usually what I've done is like when I was a sales manager and I had a VP and they were going to interview next. So I said, okay, you're going to meet with John next. I go, why don't we sit down for 2 minutes? And so you get a little bit of, you get like kind of a group to see how are they going to talk, how are they going to handle that? Because it's a little bit of a wild card, but just like the full on, it usually is not. It's not prepared well. People have their own agendas and what questions, and you're fighting for the time and everything. Yeah.
you're fighting for time, and then there's no follow-up. Because if your
Yeah.
question is not answered sufficiently, at
Yeah.
least the rest of the people on the panel didn't think it was sufficient, because the next person is so hyper-focused on asking their question, because they think their
Yeah.
question is a real zinger question, that they go on and they don't do a follow-up. Instead of abandoning their
Yeah.
question and say, wait,
Right.
when Dan asked you about such and such, can you
Right.
expound on that? Because I didn't quite get that. They don't
Yeah.
do that. They want to answer their question. Then at the end of the day, the guy gets hired. It turns out to be a bad hire, because there
Yeah.
was, follow-up and,
Yeah.
secondary, tertiary
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. It
It's a
makes sense.
challenge. It's a big challenge. And this is the stuff managers have to deal with. So for all the leaders out there that are listening to this right now, and you just heard that exchange about interviewing, you know, look at your turnover rate. Now, there's
Mm.
going to be some mitigating circumstances as to why some
Yep.
people leave, obviously. But if the turnover rate is higher than you want it to be, I mean, you were at one company, what, 19 years, did you say, Dan?
Yeah.
When's the last time you interviewed someone that had 19 plus years?
Yeah. Means I'm old. Well, the other part of it is there's so much online, Zoom interviewing but again, it's never as good as in person. But if you can formulate some really good questions, you can get a lot out of a Zoom interview. You still want to do a face to face, but if you got the right approach, I think there's like some of those points you were making makes a lot of sense.
Well, we learned a long time ago that when you do an interview, the interview starts when either the recruiter calls you on the phone to say, hey, I'd
Yeah.
like to set up a screening interview with you. That's when the interview starts, because
Yeah.
each one of those interactions should be assessed. When the person shows up, you talked about in person, they show up and they come to your office building and they step through the lobby and they interact with the security guard that tells them which elevator to jump on to go up to see
Yeah.
you. Come back and say, how was that person? What was their demeanor
Right.
like? Ask that security person. Or if it's a admin person at the desk and they tell you to take a seat in the lobby, Dan Mueller will be with you in just a moment. Would you like some water?
Right.
All of that's part of the interview. That's part of
Yep.
that. So when that person leaves your office after interviewing you, you go out, talk to the person that was sitting there that says, what were they like? Did they do small talk with you? Were they engaging? Were they gregarious? Were they matter of fact? How were
Yep.
all of that is part of the interview because that tells you how they're going to be. Remember this, the interview is typically everyone's best day on the job.
Yeah. 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 It's like when you work with a rep and you have a bad day, you're like, that's tough because that was your best. This is the best. This is their best day they put together, you know? It's always like, and we used to do those, you know, your boss, that's the other piece. Like you know, it's in a situation where big sales teams and, you know, you work with your boss comes in maybe once a quarter or, you know, it's not that often and you put together, you know, a couple really good days, you know, and it's always amazing. I'll work with a rep and like, I mean, you're not always going to have a great day, but you're going to be busy. You're going to be running around. And it's like, if they're not putting together a solid day, then like you said, this is the best. This is how they're looking the best. So,
Yeah, we call those milk runs.
yeah.
And what I encourage managers to do, now sales reps don't like this, but I encourage managers to do this. Let's say that you're going to fly in to Seattle and you're going to work with one of your reps and you've got 2 days already planned out. Now,
Hmm.
you know as well as I know, they've already contacted the places you're going to go and say, hey, look, I'm bringing my boss in tomorrow. So, you guys all like, be
Yep.
nice to me, okay? It's all planned
Yep.
out. I tell managers, say, look, whatever they've got planned as you're driving, you go, well, look at that hospital over there. You go, oh, yeah, that's not on our route. Well, it may not be on our route, but let's make a call there
Yeah. Why
and then
not?
divert it to go over
Yeah.
there and see how they do it.
Yeah.
Do they
Yeah.
sweat bullets because number one, it's not on their route and they haven't prepped them to tell them that they're coming? And you get a
Right.
chance to see how they work, we call the total office call. How do they work that? Do they know how to
Yeah.
run
Yeah.
a hospital? Because
Yep.
that's where you can really see what they're doing when you're not with them. And
Yeah.
then we used to do this thing, and you probably did it too. It's called taking a call off. You never want to
Mm.
take a call off. You're there, but you didn't do anything. You showed
I haven't
up.
heard that term, but yeah, yeah, I know the,
Yep, I'm sure you have experienced it. They show
yeah.
up, they're there, you get nothing accomplished, you're not even seeing the right person. Sally loves you. She loves
Right.
when you come in. She even gives you a hug. So you go in and say hi to Sally, you talk, a little small talk, and you've accomplished nothing.
Yeah. Zero.
But it felt good.
Yeah. Well, even like the basics of like, you're ready to walk into an account and you're like waiting. And I've seen this sometimes. You're waiting like, okay, before you leave, you know, like, again, I'm going back to my old days. You're in the car. Okay, before we get out, this is who we're meeting with. This is our goal. This is what we're going to do. The goal of the meeting is this and this and this. Okay. So you're like, you're totally prepped going in. It's like walking in. I'm like, okay, she's not gonna. Okay, let's sit down. Let's just sit down before we go in. What are we doing? What's our plan? It's like, again, if I wasn't there, then they're not, that's like not how they're thinking. They don't have a game plan. And then that goes back to like those really good salespeople. Like when I was early in my career, I would meet a couple of them and frankly, they weren't really that impressive, you know, like this guy, like, yeah, but you see how he works, you know, prepared, he's organized, he's asking the right, you know, sales process. So I don't know. I always look back to some of those.
Well, we call those pre-call planning.
Yeah, it's basic, but it's a lot of it's lacking.
And you know what? When a rep is not doing well, I don't know where you point the finger, but if a rep is not performing well, at least not up to standard, I'll always ask the manager, is it the rep's fault or is it your fault?
Hmm.
Because your job as a manager are all these things that, you're talking about, Dan. I mean, these
Yeah,
things that have to do with, are you helping the rep and teaching the rep how to
yeah,
pre-call plan? Are you
yep,
teaching the rep how not to take a call off and just go
yep,
because they feel good? I mean, your job is to really guide and teach me. And it's not just young reps, it's seasoned reps as well.
Yeah.
Teaching them how, do they know where they're going? Do they know the right questions to ask? We often think about listening to the questions. I mean, are you asking the right types of questions? I mean, do
Right.
you know what the right types of questions are? These
Yeah.
are the things that the manager has got to be doing so that the rep is performing better. And I'm telling you, we go back to what we talked about earlier. We go off to management training. That's not on the agenda.
Yeah.
That's not part of what we study. Now, maybe there are some companies out there that when their managers do meet up in, Chicago in the summertime for a 4-day managers meeting, that it's all about workshops.
Yep.
That's wonderful if they do that, because that's what's needed so that when the managers come back, they're equipped with some new tools in their bag to be able to say, okay, let me show you how, this works and
Yeah.
what's the benefit here. And I'm sure you've experienced that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Well, great. You know what? This is good stuff here. I
Yeah.
mean, you've
Old
provided.
school. It's old school a little bit, but it's, stuff that's, I think it's relevant.
I would agree,
It's the
man.
basics. It's the basics, but a lot of, it's if you're not doing the basics, then spinning wheels.
You know what, Dan? This has been awesome. I mean, I appreciate you taking the time, man. I think you've enlightened our audience, and that so many of the subjects that we covered, all of it intertwined within interpersonal relationships, because
Yeah.
that's what makes the difference,
Yeah.
for all of this. And I really want to thank you, man, for taking the time.
Eduardo, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And to all of those out there listening, once again, if some of this sparked with you and you've experienced it and you're aware of it, then we do encourage you to subscribe and become part of our viewers and watch and wait for the next episode coming up. And we certainly appreciate having you. And so for now, we'll sign off for this episode of the Inside Scoop. We thank our guest, Mr. Dan Mueller, for everything. Until we come again, take care, everyone. Bye for now.
For more exclusive leadership insights, be sure to subscribe to the Inside Scoop on YouTube and Spotify. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that share button and spread the word. See you next time on the Inside Scoop.